What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? How are we doing? Sunday Night Football just comes to an end. An all-time great game. That would be a little bold, but you know, it's weird. You find out you're a sicko when you're like, this game sucks, but I'm still kind of into it. Multiple moments throughout the game where I was just, especially the fumble late that the Giants I thought could recover. There was a sack on Joe Burrow. You're just enthralled. I guess something special about football, even though the game was pretty bad. The Bengals win, go to 2-4. The Giants lose, also go to 2-4. I don't have much to say, but I will hit on a couple quick points. Have a quick thought on tomorrow's Monday Night Football game, and then we'll discuss my trip to the Oklahoma-Texas game, as well as overrated, underrated, as we try to do every single Sunday night. We went on with Colin, as we do every Sunday after the afternoon games. Kind of a weak afternoon slate. The Cowboys got destroyed by the Lions. I would say the story out of that game, well, was probably some comments from Jerry, but also that Aiden Hutchinson shattered his leg and is currently, saw when Dan Campbell gave his press conference that he was in surgery. So that's pretty devastating. And yeah, it was bad. The Raiders got killed. The Chargers destroyed the Broncos. The Broncos kind of fake came back, but check out that podcast. You guys know the drill. But before we dive into some football, I got to tell you about my friend, I got to tell you about my friends. I often want to say family, my partners, and the official ticketing app of this podcast, Game Time. They've meant a lot to me because, every once in a while, try to let my hair down, even though I don't have any, and have a little fun. I did it this weekend, and I cannot recommend using my friends at Game Time enough because if you want to go to any event, college, pro, concerts, comedy shows, search by venue, search by team, search by artist, search by anything. It's so easy. Price points gives you incredible views of your sight line when you're picking the tickets. They have great flash deals. Cannot recommend my friends at Game Time. Got to thank them again for taking care of me. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app. Create an account. Use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account. Redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app. Last minute tickets. Lowest price is guaranteed. Okay, quick couple thoughts on the Bengals and Giants. First and foremost, anytime that let's start with the Bengals. Last week, they had several double-digit leads, as in the Ravens had to score multiple times to tie the game or take the lead. The Bengals easily should have won that game. It was one of Joe Burrow's greatest performances of his career. There was literally not a throw in that game that you wouldn't chalk up as like, you could make a highlight for his career just on that game alone. The touchdowns, the big third downs, just the overall performance, it was legendary. And when you score 38 points in regulation in the NFL, you should win 100% of the time. You should never lose that game. And, you look at the Bengals and the question mark has been that game, they lose. You go to the Washington game at home. They do not force a punt. And I understand they've had injuries. Every team's had injuries. It's part of, honestly, it feels like more guys are hurt this 2024 season than I ever remember. But you're paying your defensive coordinator a lot. You've had a lot of success with him. You should be able to manipulate spots where you just can get a stop. Then you have games like tonight where I understand Lamar is a little different animal than Daniel Jones. And, Malik Neighbors is multiple week concussion protocol, even though he's going to the Travis Scott concert during the week. And Brian Dable's like, we'll handle that in-house. Clearly they weren't thrilled with that. But regardless, they played well last week on the road in Seattle. And I get Seattle's defense isn't good. But you had to, like, the Bengals came in, took them really seriously, and kicked their ass and worked them. And if they had just had moments like tonight, not games, moments in the Ravens game, this team's 3-3. And we're going, hey, look at the landscape, look at the AFC. They can get 10 wins, no problem. But that loss, I'm even saying, hey, listen, the Washington game wasn't their night. But the Raven game, they should have won that game. And right now they should be 3-3. And one of the big differences tonight, when they had to have a big throw, Daniel Jones couldn't make it. Joe Burrow, boom, even in a game like this is a forgettable box score for him beside the touchdown run. The throw has to be made, rolling to his left. Classic Joe Burrow. Why is a $50 million guy? Because we know the type game that he can have, like last week, or the game against Washington. And then he can have, for his standards, clunker and find a way in the biggest moments to essentially end the game, which he did. But I think the hard part if you're a Bengal fan, and this is the thing that's kind of hanging over Zach Taylor, you dig yourself such a hole, it might be too late to drop the shovel and start climbing out. Because it's very, very difficult just to get back to 6-6 from 1-4. Because even if you win again, you're 3-4. Then all of a sudden you drop a game, you're 3-5. It's just really, really hard. And that Raven game, we might look back, if they end up 8-9, might have been the difference in the season. Because if you win that game, who knows? Maybe you're that much more likely to be a 10-win team. Losing that game forces you that 7-8 range. It's not just the one individual game, but it's the mindset every single week where you feel like you can't take a breath or else you're going to drown. And I think that's kind of what, the Bengals found themselves in a situation. So, listen, if their defensive line steps up, they're going to be a problem because that's kind of been one of their calling cards. Now, they've lost some DBs over the last couple of years, but the defensive line play tonight looked way better than it had earlier this season. I think if you're the Giants, Daboll looks pretty natural in that offensive coordinator position. And I think he's clearly been extra aggressive this season, partly because when, your team can't score in these fourth down scenarios, kicking a field goal, okay, it ties the game. But like, if I'm going to win the game, this is my only opportunity. I don't make it past the 20-yard line. Hell, like the 35-yard line. The 35-yard line might as well be the red zone for the Giants. But when you're paying your quarterback this much money, and listen, he'd been playing well. And you watch him tonight, you go, ugh. Something's just in the biggest moment, national television. This is a team like obviously their defense is playing well, but they're struggling to score. If we just get to, you get that last touchdown that makes it 17, but if the Giants had just been able to get to 13 points in the third quarter, it would have been feeling in great shape. Instead, they have no points going into halftime, get a touchdown in the third quarter. You're just like, this team fucking sucks. And I get Malik Neighbors is not around, but in the NFL, you should manipulate basically close to 2 touchdowns. And they just cannot do it. And everyone was scoring on this defense. So it just gets back to Daniel Jones. Every time you kind of want to start liking him, like, he's having a pretty solid season. He's actually been better than the way people talk about him. Then you watch him tonight, you're like, that's the guy that I know and love. That's the guy. Because I've come away going, I kind of like a couple of their receivers. Neighbors comes back. If they ever were able to get a tight end in the offseason that he felt comfortable about to put with Robinson and Slayton and be like, kind of like their skill guys. Draft a running back. Their defense obviously has some pieces. Brian Burns, I don't pretend to know all his work, who have watched all of his snaps in Carolina, played in a lot of irrelevant games. But tonight, that fucker looked like a $30 million a year guy. That guy tonight was like, damn, I don't want that dude on my team. He had a stretch there in the fourth quarter where he made like 4 straight plays. Lit up Joe Burrow, looked like he broke his rib. Had another play where he shed like a pulling guard or tackle, stood him right up, threw him off, made the tackle. Another play, beelines it down the line of scrimmage to make a tackle. It's like, geez. Didn't know he had this in the bag. Because usually, like, to me, he's been a little bit more of a flash player. But you get that level of play with that defensive line. Their defense has played well as a whole. Like the Bengals, speaking, if they had won that Ravens game, all of a sudden, if the Giants were able to win this game, which was extremely winnable, You're 3-3. But instead, you lose. Now, to me, you're looking at like 5-6 wins because that's just, you get on the roller coaster of Daniel Jones because your defense isn't going to play like this every night. It's just, that much is clear. And I thought that they had that stretch. Like you look back, if Daniel Jones had played a little bit better in the Cowboy game, they win. That game was there for the taking. But who let him down in that game? How many passes, deeper down the field did Daniel Jones hit DBs in the butt, skip off guys' feet? He is just not a dependable player. And that's hard to say out loud when you're paying someone $40 million a year. I don't care what business you're in, whether it's pro sports, whether it's real estate, whether you name the industry. If I put the price point at, this cost us $40 million a year, you would like to feel good about that operation, that entity, that player, that artist, whoever. So you can tell me, oh, that's the price of admission. Well, if that's the price of admission for quarterbacks, we now have a pretty clear view of you pay the wrong guy, you are screwed. And it doesn't mean he can't have good moments. Doesn't mean he can't have good games. Doesn't mean he's not a likable, good human being. Good face of the franchise. Nice chiseled jawline. Looks good in a suit. Some short shorts in the summer. You're like, God, this is a good-looking dude. Well-educated from Duke. But this is pro football. Meaning for 60 minutes, if you play quarterback for, I don't need it all 17 weeks, but I don't know, a large percentage of the games, I need to rely on you pretty heavily. And every time it's like, we kind of need you tonight, buddy. Kind of need you. Like, where'd he go? And that's what it kind of felt like tonight. That one, if I'm Dayball, hurts. Like, that sucks. Because I had to cross my mind. I'm looking good. I'm skinny now. Calling the plays. I got the little glasses on. I thought he was dialing up some pretty good plays. Obviously, the defense made some, the DBs made some good plays late in the game, but I feel like guys are kind of getting open. It's just, can you trust the quarterback? I think he was like 21 of 40 tonight. One quick thing also on New York sports. Big weekend for New York sports. Mets, Giants, both lose tonight. You got Aaron Rodgers and the Jets and the Yankees tomorrow. Tirico and Collins were talking about that at the end of the game. Quick take on the Jets. I think tomorrow is either you win. It's like, okay, you can have a real season and compete to, be that 8-9 mark. I don't think they're a playoff team. Didn't think that before Saleh. Don't think that now. But they win tomorrow. Like, I'd listen to the argument. If they lose tomorrow, it is over. Get ready for implosion central. Now, I think they're going to lose. I plan on putting money on the Bills. And I know, and we've talked about this before, the interim coach, the kind of the fake excitement or the fake boost of energy that you get from it. Had a little Thai food before I recorded this. Probably not a great idea. But if they lose tomorrow night, in 6 days, they play the Steelers, who don't quite look as good as they did the first 3 or 4 weeks, but are still a very, very difficult team to play. The Jets are going to be coming off a short week, Sunday night football. I like the Steelers in that spot, especially if the Jets are 2-4. So if the Jets are going to save their season, you fire Robert Saleh on Tuesday. You bring Ulbrich. Rodgers saying, no blood on my hand. I had nothing to do with it. Woody just called me to ask me what I had for dinner, how many times I went to the bathroom, and what show I was going to watch before I went to bed. That's all we talked about. It is what it is now. Ulbrich, Todd Downing, Aaron Rodgers. Let's go. I'm betting against them, but I know this. If they lose this game, like I think 4 or 5 wins is on the table. Their defense, John. Brees Hall. Get ready for disaster. You win? Like, we already knew we were on the emotional roller coaster. That's not going to end just because they got rid of Robert Saleh, who, let's face it, was actually a pretty calm individual. It's not like Saleh acted like Nick Sirianni. He was pretty mellow. Maybe Aaron Rodgers thought he was too mellow. So now you get the kind of more bravado, former player, Ulbrich. See if it works. I don't think it will, but it better. If the Jets don't want to have a similar year to last year and the previous year of just disaster, better find a way to beat the Bills. The roller coaster of an NFL season is moving right along, and it promises to be a month full of tricks, treats, and of course, touchdowns. At DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, is the number one place to bet touchdowns. Running it from the one or an 80-yard bomb. We don't care how they score touchdowns. We want to bet on them. DraftKings heard us and is delivering. Ready to place your first bet? Try betting on something simple, like a player to score a touchdown. Go to DraftKings Sportsbook app and make your pick. Here's a reason for new customers to do a touchdown dance of their own. Bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Score big with DraftKings Sportsbook, the number one place to bet touchdowns. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. Okay, before we get to a little overrated, underrated, I did want to talk about my experience at the Oklahoma-Texas game. And I don't go to, obviously, many games anymore because Sunday is just such an important work day for me. And it's so important for me to be able to keep track and watch everything that when you go to a game, you can't watch everything. And Saturdays, I've been saying for a while, I wanted to go to a big game. It is difficult to get in and out of LSU. It is difficult. It's just too cold to go to Ohio State, Michigan. But like LSU at night, obviously would be number one on most people's bucket list. And that game, I watched a decent amount of the second half against Ole Miss. It's just very difficult. So I settled for the Red River Rivalry, which I'm sorry is pretty badass. And it got me home before the 10 a.m. games even kicked off. So that there was a convenience factor there, but part of it is I wanted to take in the festivities. And on the surface of this whole thing is I am very jealous of you guys that went to big programs. And it doesn't just have to be like Texas or Ohio State. It could just be any Power Five. Like you went to Iowa State or Boston College or Washington State, that you just have a program in football and basketball, even if they suck, every once in a while has a good season. And you and the people you went to college with, maybe meet up for a game. And there's an experience there that your team plays on television. It just matters. It's why I take a lot of pride in Fresno State and the people I know that I worked with there and that played for them when I was there. It was an experience that changed my life, obviously professionally, but even personally. It meant a lot to me coming from Cal Poly, sports means a lot to me, and football specifically, and it didn't matter there at all. And it's not something that you share in common with the people you go to college with. And at Fresno, it's not Texas or Oklahoma, but it does have a communal impact on people that go to school there, that follow the program, the community. It was cool. And Oklahoma, Texas is that on steroids times 100. And that game, first off, it's at the State Fair, which in theory should be really cool. It is, unless you like not having any space. Like there has to be hundreds of thousands of people inside this fairground, which is an awesome sight to see if you had like an aerial view, but trying to work your way through it, even wanted to get like fried turkey legs or the corn dog or whatever. I mean, there is so much incredible food that there's 700 people in every line. So it is difficult. It was a lot of people, which is why we just said, screw it. It was like, we got there at about 11 o'clock. The game kicked off at 2:30. By about 12:15, we're like, let's just go to the stadium. Let's just get in there and eat food in there because you couldn't move. And so we did that. And that stadium was completely full, probably 30 minutes left to go before kickoff. And the passion of these two programs, it's just something that, and I was thinking about this. I've been to a lot of NFL games. You can't fake youthful energy. And the one thing you get at these college games, now this game's unique because it's like a split crowd, but even if you just went to a Texas home game or an Oklahoma home game or a Bama home game or Arkansas home game or whatever, any big program's home game, having the students there is something you don't get at NFL games. And I think there's an energy that those kids bring. It's weird. Me and Maria, it's like, God, the girls look like 15 and some of these guys look like 17. Like these guys are 21. Now, some of them were definitely not of age drinking next to us, but it's just like they just look so young. Like, did I look that young when I was in college? But their passion for the program and it's just something you can't fake in an NFL game. The pageantry of the bands, it's a very, very unique environment of McConaughey specific to this game is I'm in the Oklahoma section because my guys worked there forever and I've become an adopted fan of the program. And McConaughey walks out probably with like 25, 30 minutes to go before kickoff. And every single person, I'm talking probably if there are 70,000 people, I mean, in the entire stadium, half of them are Texas people. You're talking 30,000 people all doing horns down as he's got this smile walking right in front of the section doing horns up. It's like, this is awesome. This is really, really cool. And then the game starts, and obviously Oklahoma's not very good. And my overall take from a football standpoint is one, Oklahoma will be fine, big picture. They're just missing so many offensive guys. They've always recruited good offensive players. That's not going to be their issue. If they are going to be good on defense and get an offense, their program's going to be okay. But Texas clearly has national championship aspirations. And I'm not trying to overreact on a couple passes when the guys miss some games. But even as the game went on, like one of the reasons, listen, Sark's an excellent play caller. And it was on full display in that game. And he was much more willing to run the ball, obviously this season. And even at points in time, a couple years ago when he had Bijan, I thought, like, just hand your guy the ball. And that's the easiest way to, like, don't put it all on your quarterback's shoulders. Because Quinn Ewers, to me, again, it's only one game, and I know he has a larger body of work. I've never been the biggest fan, and then I came around in the Michigan game, and now he's been hurt a bunch, and then I'm watching him overthrow guys. I'm like, I don't see it. You couldn't put a gun to my head, and I would take him one. Like, I just say, yeah, pull the trigger. I don't even know if I see a first rounder. Now, I understand that's not the way it works in football. If he's viewed as a top 50 player, he'll end up going in the first round, but I don't know. To me, he just looks like historically the type guy that would get drafted on day two. He plays on an absolutely loaded team. NFL wideouts, NFL offensive linemen, NFL running backs, awesome defense. They obviously got a good coaching staff now. Uh, this college football season's pretty wide open. I don't think there's any like, you got to go through this team. Could Texas win the national championship? 100%. Could they lose? In the Elite Eight or Final Four or whatever, because he has a terrible game, 100%. So I think they are a little bit of a wild card. And the one thing I was sitting around a couple Texas fans, and I just said, like, what would it take? Could he ever get benched in a game? Like, if he throws 3 picks and you're down to Georgia in the third quarter, would they go to Arch? Or is this one of those, would you lose a game with Quinn? Like, how long is the rope? And only Sark and the coaching staff truly knows that. Like, even Arch and Quinn probably don't really know that. And I'm not acting like Arch today is that much better than Quinn Ewers because he has way more experience. But you could feel the vibe. As long as Quinn's winning, everything's cool. And that's the cool part about these programs. It's like they treat, like they know this squad like you would an NFL team. And I think this is a little bit of a powder keg if they get into a big game. Now, you can lose a game and still make the playoffs. I think Texas probably plans on trying to run the table here. And they play Georgia this week. I think they're better than Georgia. But I think the two quarterbacks have a lot in common. You watch them, they're like, yeah, they're fine. They're good college players. But this talk about them going number one overall, based on what I've seen so far, seems crazy. Seems insane. But hey, I mean, what do I know? Just podcaster now. So yeah, it was just an awesome experience. The getting there and leaving is just, I have a lot of respect for you guys that go to games because it's one thing about football. And it was cool being there, having beers, being in the atmosphere. But watching a game on the couch, you see so much more. It is the greatest television sport in the history of America. And I don't think it's possible for it to ever be topped because the viewing experience at home or at a bar or whatever, just on television, dramatically trumps being at the game. It's not even close. And that's why going to a game for me has to really matter. And I think for you guys that go, now, it doesn't mean you can't have good seats and see everything that's going on. But I think we all would acknowledge you get a better viewing experience to know exactly what's happening at home on television, which is what I've said forever in the NFL. they'd like you to come to the games and be a season ticket holder, but at this point in time, they don't really give a shit. They make their money from television. College is definitely turning into that as well. Now they are, because their budgets are much smaller and their television packages are smaller. They still like you, especially the universities, because they use it to pay for all the other sports. You to go to the games. It matters for Texas and Oklahoma and every program to sell seats. Like I'm not. It's way more important in college. But the bigger and bigger these television deals get, like it's very important for you to watch the games. And that was the one thing you realize. Like I'm glad I went, and it was a really cool experience, even though the game kind of sucked. For We left in the third quarter. Like the first quarter was really good, really intense. Second quarter for half of it was solid. Then the game just unraveled. But you just like, God, this game probably better on television. Because you know what? If it sucks, I can change the channel. I can turn it to Florida, Tennessee. And that's the one thing that football, like going to an NBA game, if you have good seats, is awesome. It's an awesome experience. Baseball just depends on what happens. Football, whether good game is good or bad, it's not as good as being home. It's just simply not. Okay, let's do a little overrated, underrated, and then get you out of here. Uh, One thing I flew home on JSX, which is essentially like the commercial private airline, but it's not that expensive. Like if my ticket would have been 250, I get this ticket for like 500, but it only flies out of certain areas. And I saw that they fly Dallas to Phoenix, and you don't have there's you can show up 5 minutes before the flight. You basically walk right on. It's a small airline. The Wi-Fi is Starlink. I see all these people in the media love talking shit about Elon. I mean, they are fucking morons. Starlink is fucking incredible. I watched on the plane the Sunday morning game, no different than I would have if I was sitting on my couch at home. I was tweeting, I was on scrolling on Instagram, I was reading some articles. The power of that thing was mind blowing. My brother's used it forever as a farmer because he'll be out in podunk nowhere and he's like needs to look something up. He said forever. He's like, it is badass. And JSX not only is we just wake up an hour before we need to leave, eat a little breakfast, go. It was worth spending a couple $100 extra. Now you can't get the flights everywhere, so it's very pound specific. But that internet is easily. I've never really been on a private jet, but I don't know if private jets have great internet, but I have never, ever been on a commercial airline ever that had an internet that would hold a candle to what I just experienced today in that Starlink. So props to them for having the Starlink. So I watched the game this morning and it unraveled. Obviously, the Bears curb stomped them. And I was thinking this, you know what's overrated? Thinking just because you'll get the number one overall pick and there's some sweet quarterback in the draft. See this in the NBA because there's some sweet prospect that guy will save your franchise. Trevor Lawrence, one, it truly is. And listen, he actually showed a little more passion, I thought, this morning, being into the game even late as they're getting their ass kicked. That was I guess nice to see. But he had some throws in that game where you're just like, bro. Now he also had some drops. Gabe Davis hands at point in time looked like me. The LSU rookie dropped a touchdown that went right through his hands. That was pretty embarrassing. So it wasn't all on Trevor Lawrence. But let's face it, when they drafted him, they expected more. I don't know why they would have expected more last offseason. Like you did have a body of work, but I definitely thought he was a better player, even based on his first 3 years than what we're seeing now. I thought it was insane to give him $200 million. But when you're the Jags, like, let's face it, there's just kind of a stink to your organization. Doug will get blamed. The defensive coordinator that kind of has got like that porn star mustache going clearly is awful. Part of it when you're an owner is when you get really mad. I'm sure Shad, like Woody last week's got a bunch of buddies over in the London area, so he's rubbing elbows with all the Euros, and they're sitting there watching the team getting embarrassed. It's a tough look. But I think one thing that bothers you is you justify in your head someone can fix Trevor. We gave him $200 million. He's a worthy player. Someone can make that right. I think where you get bothered is like, we need a new defensive coordinator. Okay, a defensive coordinator, even if they don't have that much leverage, still costs like 2-year deal, $3 million. So like, I am paying this human being. I was talking about this to someone at a bar this weekend. Could have been one of like 7 days. I've been drinking a lot, need to go on a big cleanse starting Monday. But how many employees in America? I'm not talking business owners. I'm talking W-2 employees, non-athletes or, musical artists or even like someone in Hollywood shooting in Netflix makes 7 figures as a W-2 employee. That number is so small. And you get football coaches. I mean, I can't tell you, I don't have the information, but I've said this forever. I know that all the offensive and defensive coordinators in the NFL all make 7 figures. All of them. Countless offensive line coaches do, some defensive line coaches do. Do you understand how much money that is to be an employee? That one, like, yeah, there are some employees that make 7 figures. Most of those guys are in like high level management positions. If I am the offensive line coach, I'm not even the highest guy on the totem pole on my side of the ball. So Shad Khan cuts this check to this defensive coordinator that looks like he could have been in Dirk Diggler in Boogie Nights. I mean, that's just the stash he's got going, and he is getting shredded on a weekly basis. If you're Sean, you're like, I'm paying this guy $1.75 million. Like, that's the type of stuff that really pisses you off. Because the way you made your money, like your high paid employees, it's all relative to whatever your industry, you felt like we're giving you a lot. So you always kind of justify the players. It's never their fault. But the coaches, they're the easiest ones to blame. And once you start paying these huge freights, even if you're making a lot of money, you're like, heads are going to roll. Underrated. I hate to keep beating a dead horse here, but it is crazy how it's almost underrated. I don't think we're even talking about enough how bland Tom is. And I don't blame him because this is not his thing. This is entertainment. And he's been an entertainer for 30 years as a player. It wasn't, his press conferences were always really, really boring. That was never his thing. Now that he talks for a living, you got to entertain. What's funny is I said something, I made a comment on one of these videos of like Belichick, Lombardi, and Matt Patricia. I said, I wish you would just remove Matt Patricia and just let the other two guys talk. I don't need Matt Patricia, who's bringing nothing to the table. And there were a lot of somehow all these comments showed up in my my inbox thing on Instagram, and one guy looks like a complete douche, just came off the top rope and was like, "Who are you? This guy's got 25-year experience. You shut up. You only scouted in the league for a couple years. Can't have an opinion." I'm not saying that Matt Patricia doesn't know football. If you just said talk football between you and Matt Patricia, he would know more than me. He would know more than most people. But now he talks for a living. And he's on these shows. It's like, okay, entertain me. And every time he talks, I want to either fast forward or turn it off because he brings nothing to the table. He will not say anything. It's why so many coaches are so bad once they get in the media because they all want to get back into coaching. And I think that's the biggest fraud move. It's like, one, you're just trying to get a little paycheck here. But either say something or just don't do this job because especially if you're a guy that was a dick to the media and didn't care about this side, like, okay, you're going to enter this realm. Like, your job's now to entertain. Can you entertain me or can you not? And I think Tom is really struggling like his entire life when he talked about football, unless he was doing a true like one-on-one interview with, whoever over the years and got really personal and was like really powerful. Whenever he got into a situation where the mic was in front of him and a lot of people were looking at him, which is essentially what's happening now, he was pretty bland. He was not the guy that like Julian and Gronk and Grable talks about. All these guys talk about this incredible personality. He just didn't really have it. That's the thing. Like Vrabel's a good example. Vrabel went from player, big personality, transitioned into coaching. And after a while, you like felt like when Vrabel would talk, you kind of got the player meets the coach personality. Obviously, as a coach, you can't just say whatever you think. You got to be careful about certain things. But it was like, I got to feel his personality. I'm watching Tom. I feel he's got caught in between, which is understandable. This is not his, this is technically his job. He's got no training to do this. And how in defense of him, how would he even know what was entertaining? Because for 20 straight years on Sundays, he was playing. He's not watching all these games, doesn't know what's good or bad. I'm not saying he didn't watch games in some of his free time, but he was more looking like, all right, we play this team in 3 weeks. I wonder what their front is. Were you and me and everyone that's been watching football casually our entire life, because we didn't play in the NFL for 10, 15, 20 years, knows what's good and bad and just wants to be entertained. And I think it's pretty difficult for him. I really do. And I'm not trying to shit on him, but like I just think it's like kind of crazy how he can't, I don't know, he just like be one of the guys. It's been really, really hard for him to kind of figure that. I mean, it's not happening. It's not happening. And today's a good example. When you get these blowout games, that's when the best shine. Like a Gruden, a Madden. Like, just you kind of got to entertain now. Pull some fucking tricks out of your back pocket and let her rip. And he just not going to have that. Can he get that over the next 5 years? Maybe. And listen, he's going to own the Raiders, because I had someone on a mailbag hit me up about what will the Raiders do when Mark Davis dies, because he doesn't have any kids. Well, he's doing this job because they're paying him almost $400 million, but he needs that capital to keep investing or have investing so he can make money to ultimately purchase this team, which I'm sure the league. But you need a lot of money to be able to purchase this team as the majority shareholder, which gets to pull the trigger on the decisions. So, like, ultimately, is he just doing this job so he can one day be the owner of the Raiders? Which I think at this point in time, it's fair to assume, yeah. Because I bet he really, really wants to own the Raiders. Well, to own the Raiders, let's just say Mark lives another 5, 8, 9 years, is going to be really, really expensive. We're talking not like 2, 3 billion. We're talking like 8, 9. And he needs to accumulate as much money as humanly possible before that to even have a chance to cut that big of a check. Overrated. I was thinking about this morning on the plane. Again, Starlink just blew my mind. I mean, it really did. Roger Goodell, I guess, said this morning that an international Super Bowl is on the table, which a lot of you guys have been hitting me up against or about. And I said, yeah, I mean, I wouldn't bet against it, but who knows? It'd be a logistical nightmare. But clearly they're talking about it. I think these two things go hand in hand. You have a game in Europe or a 6:30 a.m. kickoff every single game, basically, of the year. Like 15 Sundays a year, maybe 16. You wouldn't do it that first week. I guess you could, but it would basically be all year round. It would be its own property. Sunday morning games at 6:30 for us on the West Coast. And it hit me today. Do you know what would become immediately overrated and basically unnecessary? Now, I've thought these things were overrated. I don't watch them, our pregame shows on Sunday morning. Now, I get these networks need programming. ESPN needs to put something on TV, CBS, Fox. I get it from a programming standpoint. But if they're partly, what else are you going to be watching Sunday morning, in October or November? There's nothing else on television. If there's a game on, even if it's a bad matchup, you would just have it on your television in the background. So why would you do counter programming? These pregame shows, they are paying these guys millions of dollars. Well, why would you keep doing that? I wonder if the pregame show, if this does come to fruition, it's like, yeah, we're all in on London. We're going to have Super Bowls there every 6, 7 years. And we're going to play its own slate of games, which we will sell to Amazon or Netflix or whatever one day. I wonder if these pregame shows would be done. Why am I paying 4 guys a combined $3 million, to do this? We could just do reruns. We could just show, who knows, some taped programming. We don't need this. So I think they would be in trouble. Underrated. Downtown stadiums. Before I went to Texas this week, I was in Nashville. And the Titan Stadium, they're actually building a new one right behind it. It's going to be awesome. One, where it's located right now, is probably a top 5 location in all the league in terms of how the city meets the stadium. And I've seen it go the other way, right? When the Niners, a lot of people wanted them to build downtown San Francisco like the San Francisco Giants did, and they ended up building in Silicon Valley because of the money. And it was a point of contention for a long time. Still kind of is if you don't live in Southern California. There's nothing like a downtown arena when it works right. It is just perfect. And the Raiders are a good example. They just built the stadium on the Strip. It just works. It really does. And being in Dallas, you got Jerry's Palace, which I get it why he built it out there, but it's not like it's downtown Dallas, right? So some of these stadiums, Seattle's a good example, right downtown. I know not specifically located or some would call central downtown, but you know what I mean. And I think there's something pretty cool about having your downtown, the cool parts of your downtown, walkable and accessible to the stadium on game day, which obviously benefits as well for concerts. Overrated, sitting rookies. Just let them play. I I was I was gonna look up. Did Drake May throw 3 touchdowns or one today, or I mean two? I know I saw him throw two, but I just want to get this number right. Obviously, Jaden Daniels has had a fantastic rookie season. Caleb Williams really coming into his own, balling, and Bo Nix, who's been definitely up and down, is played every game. Where's the Patriots? Who'd the Patriots? Oh, they got killed by the Texans. How many touchdowns did he throw? He threw three. Threw three touchdowns. I'm pretty sure Jacoby had five after 5 games. And listen, the Patriots stink, and he was running around for his life. But he did make a couple throws like, yeah, if I was a Patriots fan, this is what I want to see. And I think it's pretty clear the Crafts told Gerard Mayo, yeah, we're done with Jacoby. Play the kid. And my first reaction is like, that's probably not the greatest way to do business. Because even Gerard Mayo said last week, I think a couple times, like, this is my decision. This is my decision. I thought long hard, this is my decision. Like, no, it's probably not. But listen, I don't care. This people want to see this player. If you're gonna lose, at least show him play. And if over the course he throws some picks, throws some touchdowns, at least he adds a little life to your franchise. Think how much better Caleb, Jaden, Bo Nix, if all these guys become star quarterbacks, they will all say, I mean, Jaden already is. Caleb, obviously, the last 2 weeks has been fantastic. They can look back in 3 years like that rookie year really meant a lot. I got to really build and figure out what I was good and bad at. And I think the best experience or the best way to learn and get better at whatever you do is always experience. A lot of us, and listen, I can be guilty of this. Like you plan, you think, you write notes. Like sometimes you just got to do. Like successful people, eventually they start doing. You just got to do it. I get asked all the time, how do I do a podcast? What do I need to do to grow? Just start doing things. Then you figure out what you're good at, what you're bad at, what you need to do more of, no matter what the industry is. Unless you start doing something, you can apprentice all day long. Whether it's a construction job site, whether it's architecture, whether it's podcasting, eventually you got to do it for yourself. And yeah, you might fuck up multiple times. Depending on the job, hopefully it's not something too serious. But like eventually, if you're going to be a heart surgeon, like you got to do the heart surgery. You know, like eventually, if you are whatever, you got to do it. And I think the Patriots have to be pretty happy that they just pull the trigger, and this guy's going to get a lot of run, even though their team is really really bad. Underrated. The Bucks offense. There were a couple kind of fluky picks. I was pretty locked into that game early because Spencer they were up 17-0. Then somehow they're down 20-17. Went back and forth, and then it just became a boat race in like middle of the third quarter, which the Saints they got issues. They got problems. But the Bucks offense is pretty elite. I mean, they got players for days. These two running backs, Bucky Irving, that guy's pretty damn good. Their offensive line to me looks pretty solid. Godwin had 2 touchdowns today. If your best wide receiver obviously is Mike Evans, if that's your number two, you're in pretty good shape. And now that your running backs are good, Otten's a good player. Like that's just a good offense. Now, are they going to win the Super Bowl? I don't know, but they are not an easy team to play. Obviously, Baker's resurrected his career. It's been impressive to watch. Overrated. It was named this week that Ulbrich told Todd Downing, "You're up, Hackett's down." Rodgers, the offensive coordinator. Like what? Who's calling plays? Like, give me a break. Aaron Rodgers is going to do what Aaron Rodgers wants to do. It'd be one thing. It's like, hey, we had this guy. His name was Mike Shanahan. Or, think of whoever the most famous guy is, like Andy Reid had retired and was just like a consultant. It's like, we just elevated Andy Reid, 72 years old. Like, okay. You went from Nat Hackett, who obviously is not very good, to Todd Downing. Let's not act like you just brought Gary Kubiak out of the bullpen here. So if you don't think this guy's resume and the equity he has just in the league, that if some play calls happen on Monday night, that Aaron's like, this is fucking stupid. He not calling an audible or calling a different play in the huddle. What does he care? What is Todd Downing going to do to him? So this notion that changing the offensive coordinator makes that big of a change for Aaron Rodgers. Now, the plays might work because he plays well, and maybe there's a little bit better ebb and flow, but I truly believe they're kind of calling the plays that Aaron wants to call. Call me naive. Like, he's just letting Hackett do everything. Give me a break. 40 years old? I don't believe it. And underrated. We'll end on this. How big a douche is Sirianni? I mean, seriously. Screaming at the fans. If you want to do it on the road, listen, competitive sports, people talk shit. I don't, doesn't bother me that much. But at home, hey, homie, these people are your paying customers. These people pay the bills around here. And they're booing you because you are struggling to beat Deshaun Watson, the Cleveland Browns, who are probably going to win 3 or 4 games this year. I mean, just an atrocious football team. That's why they're booing you. And that's why they're screaming shit at you. So, yeah, it's like, well, they were the people that threw a snowball at Santa Claus. But yeah, I get it. Fucking some fans are crazy. But in this specific game, when Jonathan Vilma said on the broadcast, I don't know why they're even booing these guys. You don't? Because Jonathan, it looks like they're going to lose or in a close game. At the time, they were winning by 3, but the Browns were driving. Actually, it was a tie game, and Jalen had just thrown out of bounds. That's when they ended up kicking a field goal to go up 13-10. And Vilma goes, I can't believe they're booing him. Where do you want him to throw him? It's not about a specific play. It's about the overall product. This city cares. And they're watching a team. Like, they have a frame of reference now. They know what good football looks like, and they know what bad football looks like. And the Eagles right now, in that game, beside a couple plays on offense, the offense is putrid. Sacking Deshaun Watson a lot doesn't get you a lot of credit in 2024. He gets sacked all the time. He constantly runs into sacks. But that effort was more than booable. And Sirianni to go back at it with his own fans. Like, I get it. You're fired up. You're excited. Like, I think that is one of the douchier moves going. Like, if I'm Jeffrey Lurie, like, bro, the people that pay premiums to sit in the lower bowl, this ain't 1987. Google how much it costs to go to some of these games, especially for the big boys. It ain't cheap. Paying a shitload of money. They're allowed to fucking boo. Unless Sirianni comes out and says something like they said something about his daughter. It's like, if they're just screaming at you for shitty football, it's one of those, bro, you wear. You go, yeah, fucking be better next time. That was embarrassing. I haven't seen his press conference yet, but if anything else besides the press conference, coming off a bye, that was an embarrassing performance. Thanks, A.J. Brown, for a couple big plays and Devontae for the 1 touchdown. Listen, I don't really take the guy seriously anymore because that move to scream at the fans, I hate, I despise when the media, I think, treats fans often like shit, even though, like, they literally pay for their jobs. Who do you think is consuming you? I think most coaches, and I think even players now, have somewhat, there's some balance. Like, I get it as a young player, not quite understanding, like, yeah, these guys kind of pay the bills. And they hear crazy shit. Obviously, coaches hear crazy shit. But as a coach, like, you kind of got to take it. If a player wants to chirp back, like, yeah, it's a little different. As a coach, it's one of those, you just give the guy a thumbs up and go to the locker room.